Hey, welcome to A Total Mess. What is this? My name is Zach. I like NASCAR, and I like weird statistical rabbit holes, so it was merely a matter of time before I began wondering how often it was that a NASCAR Cup Series driver finished a race in the same position as their car number. When the pandemic began earlier this year, I found myself with a bit of free time to make good on that inquiry, and it resulted in a half-hour video essay detailing some highlights from my research. As of that video's publication in April, this phenomenon had happened 1,408 times in NASCAR Cup Series history, and since no one had bothered to analyze it beforehand and it didn't have a name yet, I decided to give it one: Ordinaling oneself. I highly recommend you watch that video if you haven't yet, but if that doesn't apply to you or you don't have the time to watch two of these right now, here's an overview. I looked up which drivers, tracks, years, and car numbers have ordinaled the most in the Cup Series 70-plus year history, as well as other miscellaneous methodology as to how and why ordinals happen. Trends, oddities, ridiculous names, weird ties to classic moments of NASCAR history, you name it, I covered it there. But not long after, racing resumed, and several of the records, talking points, and numbers I had established as fact changed. That was bound to happen. I knew it would, and I also knew this concept was too pointless for anyone to bother stealing. Like, come on, you think Brock or Slap or Eric have time to waste rambling about ordinals when pigs fly or hell freezes over, or Rick Ware wins the Daytona 500? Oh, here's the deal. At the end of each NASCAR season for the indefinite future, I'm going to update the list of Ordinal Cup finishes and produce a video mentioning each one from that calendar year. With such a narrow scope, not every Ordinal here commands the same level of gravitas, but on the record books, they all matter, and a smaller lens can lend itself to some neat trivia regardless. 2020 was a strange season, and this recap isn't a conventional one that seeks to summarize the big picture. For that, you'd have to actually watch some racing and keep up with the news, but it does weave together a story in its own right, and it's one I'd be delighted to tell, with some of my own grumblings and opinions mixed in. I hereby invite everyone, from NASCAR diehards to total newcomers, those of you who are here for the commentary or just here for some jokes, to gather around and kick back as I run down the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series season, Ordinal style. Now, I could just list every Ordinal finish this year in chronological order and call it a day, but that's no way to build a narrative or suspense, so instead, I'll string these together in a semi-coherent manner, add a number to this here ticker every time I introduce a new 2020 Ordinal, and then analyze the data once all of them have been accounted for. Sound good? Alright, let's do it. There's no better place to start this off than where the last video left us. We were 4 races into the 2020 season when I uploaded that first video in April, and in those 4 races, 2 drivers nabbed a pre-pandemic hiatus Ordinal finish. At the time, the more recent of them was Chris Buescher, who recovered from a ride along the wall at the Spring Phoenix race to finish 17th in his new number 17 ride. This was his only Ordinal all year, his first in that car number, and his 5th all-time, adding the number 17 to his resume alongside the numbers 34 and 37. The number 37's current driver, Ryan Preece, was the other driver to Ordinal before the hiatus. Nobody Ordinal during the season-opening Daytona 500, but the very next week, the Cup Series headed west to Las Vegas, where Preece quietly blew an engine and finished 45 laps down in 37th. He was one of 4 drivers to get their first ever Cup Ordinal in 2020, and with the awful luck he had all year, it was only a matter of time before he got a second. Want to take any guesses where that happened? That's right, it came from this hellacious impact he suffered at Daytona. Kansas? What do you mean Kansas? What happened to Kansas? Oh! It's all uphill from here, though. With a 40-car field limit and only one driver running a number between 37 and 41, Preece ended the year as the series' lowest driver to Ordinal. He was the only driver to DNF in 100% of his Ordinal finishes this year, and only one other driver Ordinaled from behind the wall, Corey LaJoie, who came 32nd, 125 laps down after losing fuel pressure at the Spring Bristol race. Like Preece, LaJoie also Ordinaled his second time that season, and it too came at an August Daytona race, though he might want to take pride in this one, and not just because he finished all the laps. Due to the state of New York not granting quarantine exemptions for traveling race teams, the 2020 weekend at Watkins Glen International was canceled, and needing a road course at their disposal on the fly, NASCAR moved that track's date to the so-called World Center of Racing's infield roval layout for a one-off event. LaJoie was thus the only driver to Ordinal in this inaugural running of the Daytona road course. And though the series is set to return to it as a preseason event this February, it isn't on the calendar as a points race, meaning no one will join him as an Ordinaler on that configuration by my criteria next year, or possibly ever. Who's to say? Like LaJoie, another driver entered 2020 with 1 career Ordinal to their name before racking up 2 more, Eric Jones. As the driver of the 20, I suppose you'd expect the finishing position smack dab in the middle of the field to lack a story, and to be fair, I don't recall anything about his performance on the 2 dates he Ordinaled. But one of Jones' mediocre runs masked a feat nobody had done in 36 years. Ordinal a Cup car on a Wednesday. Ricky Rudd had done it most recently in the 1984 Firecracker 400, a race that, from its inception in '59 to 1987, was run on the 4th of July regardless of the day of the week. It's great Eric did something of note with one of those underwhelming runs, though, because for all we know, his second ordinal of the season will be his last for a while. His 2021 plans have him shifting to Richard Petty Motorsports' number 43 car, and the Cup Series field size is limited to 40 entries these days. In other words, Jones may not be ordinaling again anytime soon. Someone who won't have that problem is Ryan Blaney, who will return to his number 12 car in 2021 after bringing it home 12th twice this year. The only correlation I can draw between the two races where it happened is that they were both run as one race of a doubleheader Cup weekend. It was planned that way at Pocono from the start, but the Dover doubleheader, as well as another one a couple weeks earlier in Michigan, were the result of NASCAR doing all they could to fit in a 26-race regular season before the fall. They somehow pulled it off. Blaney, on the other hand, could not pull off a doubleheader sweep at either track, dropping to 22nd in the second Pocono race and improving from 14th in the first Dover one. Alright, that's 9 ordinals in the book, so how about for number 10, we visit the number 10, piloted by Eric Almirola. Almirola only finished 10th once this year, but he did so as the 10th ordinal of the year chronologically, and frankly, he was lucky to finish the race where it happened at all, seeing as he had a hand in touching off this massive multi-car pileup. Any damage he sustained from the contact there was minuscule enough to not matter, and he kept his car clean for the rest of the race. Not bad, AA. Speaking of not bad, how about a shout out for the 3 drivers who joined Ryan Preece as first-time ordinalers in 2020. Tyler Reddick was a fluke win away from nabbing Rookie of the Year, but more importantly, he ordinaled his number 8 car twice, both in marquee races. He became the first driver to ordinal after the series returned from hiatus, when he finished 8th in his first Coke 600 in May. He followed that up with another 8th in what for all we know might be the final running of the Brickyard 400 on the Indianapolis Oval, as the Cup Series prepares to run the road course layout of the track starting next year. His 2 ordinals mark the first time in over 11 years that the number 8 car finished 8th in a Cup race. Before this, Mark Martin last did it at Pocono in 2008. Reddick's top 10s in 2 of the most prestigious races of the year is nothing to scoff at, but neither is the overperformance of Brennan Poole's ordinal in the regular season finale, where he clinched what at that point was his best Cup finish to date, 15th. He would go on to best that a few weeks later, finishing 9th at Talladega, and we'll get to that one in due time. But even if these were more a sign of superspeedway attrition than a showcase of talent, Poole ran more cleanly in his premium motorsport shitbox than many expected he would. His part-time teammate Gray Galding was the last driver to clock their debut ordinal this year in Cup, and I'm actually shocked he hadn't gotten one before now. Galding drove the underwhelming number 23 car for dozens of races over the past several years, but he never ordinaled in it. Granted, it's not a stretch to say 23rd might have been a little too ambitious for what BK Racing was capable of before it folded, but the number 27 this year was a different story. I could not count the number of times he or the teammates he shared that number with were running right around 27th place. Hell, the average finish of the number 27 this year is 27.69, nice, but it only finished exactly 27th once, at the Bristol Night Race in August. So congrats to Preece, Reddick, Poole, and Galding for joining the Ordinal Club, and bringing the list of Cup ordinalers from 344 drivers to 348. Now that we've checked in with the young guns, it's time to address the full season retirement of at least 3 prominent drivers. Jimmy Johnson ended his career with the same ride he began it in, and though the number 48 will always be associated with him, it'll never be associated with ordinaling, because it and he never did. Matt Kenseth shocked all of us by coming out of retirement to fill a vacant seat after Kyle Larson milkshake ducked his season away, but the bad juju never left the team. As if the car was cursed, Kenseth's season went miserably, and after being nothing more than a weekly caution, or 2, or 3, he ends this year by saying goodbye to the number 42 and the sport outright for good. Really, for real this time. Probably. Maybe. The third retiree, however, is someone we'll still be seeing plenty of. Clint Bowyer, Jaws 2.0, is just about the only mouth who could dare to fill Darrell Waltrip's seat in the Fox booth. While it had been years since he was consistently a threat to win on track, it seemed like this year his slightly above averageness made him a threat to ordinal the number 14 car week in, week out, and boy did he deliver. He ended 2020 with a year-high 4 ordinals, aptly bringing his career total to 14. If you watched my last video, you'd know that 14 career ordinals may not sound like a lot, but it actually puts you in exclusive company. Of the 340-something drivers who ordinaled at least once in Cup Series history, only 20 of them have done so 14 or more times before the start of 2020, meaning Clint now joins the likes of 3 retirees from the past decade at a tie for 18th most all-time, Bobby Labonte, Michael Waltrip, and Casey Kane. These 4 men now stand guard between the aspiring many and the astronomically good few. For good measure, Bowyer's 4 ordinals this year bring his total in the number 14 car up to 7, surpassing Tony Stewart's 5 and becoming the driver with the most ordinals in that number. Now, that's impressive and all, but little about that is weird, so how about this? This year, Bowyer was straight up incapable of ordinaling in a race alone. All 4 times he did it in 2020, he was beaten to the flag by another ordinaler. Going backwards through time here, he and Brad Keselowski ordinaled at the finale in Phoenix. Kes came second in the number 2 in both the race and the championship there. During the Michigan doubleheader weekend, Keselowski, Bowyer, and Chase Elliott all ordinaled. That week, Elliott also became the only driver in 2020 to ordinal on consecutive weekends, though not consecutive races, nabbing an ordinal at New Hampshire just 7 days prior. Keselowski once again joined Bowyer on the ordinal charts at Kansas, and Bowyer's Stewart-Haas teammate Kevin Harvick even got in on the fun there too, making it the only time 3 drivers ordinaled in the same race in 2020, and only the 31st race in Cup Series history where exactly 3 drivers did that. And since it was a weird midweek race to make up for lost time during the hiatus, these 3 drivers became the first to ordinal on a Thursday since Neil Bonnet did in the 1985 Firecracker 400. Harvick scored a lone ordinal of his own at one of the Dover races, but not before the Stewart-Haas stable went 2 for 4 at Kentucky. Harvick came 4th after an utterly wild final restart that saw his new teammate Cole Custer snag the first win by a full-time Cup rookie in a non-shortened race since Juan Pablo Montoya won at Sonoma in 2007. But back to Bowyer, his ordinal in particular here is notable for another reason. As far as we know, it's the last one the Cup Series will ever record at Kentucky Speedway. As NASCAR was looking for tracks to drop from its schedule in 2021, Kentucky's dwindling attendance, mostly lackluster racing, and poor reception led to it being scrapped from next year's calendar altogether. As chance would have it, a similar track met a similar fate in more ways than one. Chicagoland Speedway was on the 2020 schedule, but due to the pandemic, its date was erased from the calendar. Not long after, the 2021 schedule was announced and Chicagoland was not on it. We had no way to know at the time, but its final Cup race was held in the summer of 2019, and just like Kentucky 2020, a retiring veteran ordinaled and a first-time Cup winner took the checkered. Alex Bowman got the dub there, while Paul Menard finished 21st in his number 21, just half a season before hanging up the fire suit. Between Chicago, Kentucky, the Daytona Road Course, and the Indy Oval, all 4 tracks leaving the Cup Point schedule in the last 2 years saw an ordinal in their final event. What better send-off could you ask for? Doesn't it just make you feel warm and fuzzy inside? Isn't it a shining beacon in the dark, guiding all lost wanderers to mathematical nirvana? Or is it an anglerfish's bulbous lantern, emanating a sickly glow for its unsuspecting prey? At this time, I would like to ask the kids to leave the room because we're about to enter the actions detrimental to stock car racing zone. Please fasten your seatbelts. Viewer discretion is advised. When Menard retired at the end of 2019, his number 21 car was seated in a 1-year agreement to fan-favorite goofball Matt DiBenedetto, Matt DiBiddledingle, Matt the Big Burrito, Matt Dick Trickle Bickle, Max DiBillading Dong, Matt DiBenedetto? Cool. DiBenedetto ran strong early in the season, but by the middle of the summer, he entered a slump and barely squeaked into the playoffs, taking the last of the 16 spots by only 6 points, and narrowly beating 7-time champ Jimmy Johnson in the process, who had missed a race due to a false positive COVID test. With almost no momentum and a tricky round of tracks to open the playoffs, I'm just going to call him Dibby. Dibby's bid for the championship fizzled out as quickly as it began. His Southern 500 was completely mediocre. He just rode around in the back without speed en route to a 21st place finish, and 2 more lackluster results in the round meant he was out of championship contention in no time. For a scrappy grassroots driver like Dibby, 2020 was still the best season he ever had, but after coming so close to winning multiple times in lesser rides as he earned his way to better equipment, he wasn't satisfied with this, and his team, Wood Brothers Racing, didn't appear to be either. Making the playoffs was great and all, but even brighter talent was knocking on their door. Pseudo-teammate Austin Cindric was kicking ass in the Xfinity Series, and people were beginning to wonder if this lame duck playoff run would be the apex of Matty D's career before getting the boot. It wasn't set in stone, but the number 21's current driver needed to prove he deserved 1 more year in that car. His motivation to win was real. He even came second in the race following his elimination. And then the next week, he won! Or he probably would have, if not for the Super Speedway Yellow Line rule! Hi class, welcome to Officiating 101. Please open your textbooks to Chapter 3. I'm just going to start reading. Take notes as you please. Since 2001, NASCAR has painted a big, bold, double yellow out-of-bounds line along the apron of the superspeedways Daytona and Talladega. For safety reasons, a driver cannot force a competitor below that yellow line, but there's a gray area here, and it's very wide. It's all up to NASCAR's discretion. Their wording is as follows. If, in NASCAR's judgment, the vehicle goes beneath the double yellow lines to improve its position, that vehicle will be black flagged. If, in NASCAR's judgment, a vehicle forces another vehicle beneath the double yellow lines in an effort to stop an advancement or pass, the vehicle may be black flagged. So, let's say hypothetically, it's the last lap, you're leading, and you find yourself trying to block someone going for a pass near the apron. You basically have three options. A, let the car go by, which isn't exactly a racer's idea of racing. B, attempt to cut off its pass, even if that gives NASCAR the right to declare your block illegal. Or C, just let yourself get turned. Forfeit the good result, maybe traumatize a few fans in the process. It's for safety, guys. Welcome to NASCAR. Now get rid of the hypothetical, and let's make it real, because that's the situation Dibby found himself in at the Fall Talladega race. We enter the picture on the final lap in the middle of turns 3 and 4. Dibby's right there in the mix, and you know what's at stake for his career. Close behind, Denny Hamlin is still in the championship hunt, as is Chase Elliott, and while a win would lock either of them into the next round of the playoffs, a top 10 in a race that sent the other playoff drivers to the garage or outer space would at least provide them with a bit of breathing room. The other guys at the front are more desperate. William Byron won the regular season finale for the first win of his career, and after being eliminated from the first round of the playoffs like Dibby, he's eager to prove his clutch victory wasn't a fluke. Eric Jones is here too, and he might have won here back in the spring had he not been pinched into the wall coming through the tri-oval, missing the win, the playoffs, and a renewed contract as a result. Last but not least, the Roush teammates of Chris Buescher and Ryan Newman are in the mix as well. Both are sneaky fast on this type of track, but Newman, who nearly won 2 of the last 4 superspeedway races, hasn't shown the same tenacity after nearly being killed in the scariest wreck of the year at the end of the Daytona 500. Even at age 42 and with his best days well behind him, he's eager to show that he still has enough pride to prove his doubters wrong. And action! Through turns 3 and 4, Matt notices Jones and Buescher making a charge up high. As soon as he drifts up the track to block them, Byron's able to get alongside him down low. In an abrupt move of desperation, Dibby hangs a left so harsh it leads Byron to drop to the apron, where he gets sideways and starts sparking. Hamlin, whose windshield was then filled with Byron's sparks and Buescher's incoming car, ducked completely below the yellow line, waited until he was well clear of them before merging back above it, and side-drafted his way to the checkered narrowly ahead of the others. Race winner, Denny Hamlin. I get why NASCAR made the judgment call they did. It's not unreasonable for Denny to assume Byron was going to spin or that the 17 was going to door slam him down there. Avoiding a wreck is an automatic get-out-of-mischief-free card when it comes to the yellow line rule, but given that a wreck didn't actually happen, that excuse doesn't stack up well here. This should have been a classic NASCAR finish, and I think it will become one, but only for the wrong reasons. If the line rule weren't a thing, there would have been no backlash about these passes, and the quality of the racing wouldn't have suffered one bit. NASCAR has the discretion to be an inconsistent body and say there was nothing wrong with these drivers' actions coming to the finish. I get it. Would you blame them for wanting to absolve themselves of the responsibility here? Should it even matter? Be honest, what would you do in this situation, knowing that at the end of the day, someone would complain no matter what? Would you watch this unfold and say, great race, fellas, we don't even want to call that one. Nice job, Denny. It's in your power to do that. Or would you not only uphold Hamlin's below-the-line win, but additionally penalize DiBenedetto instead? Vote now on your phones. That's right, you're NASCAR, so you do the least popular option on the table, penalizing Dibby as well as Chase Elliott. Wait, what? What did Chase Elliott? Okay, so within a half hour of the initial call, Elliott's penalty was rescinded and instead given to Buescher, who you hadn't realized forced Elliott below the line because you were too distracted fucking up the call for the win. Fantastic. Had this situation occurred mid-race, the driver or drivers responsible for the line violations would be required to voluntarily give up the spots they gained or drive through pit road to forfeit their track position. But because the race was already over, protocol says they get scored as the last cars on the lead lap. That took Dibby's amazing second place, arguably first place run to the checkered and knocked him back to 21st. That's the other DiBenedetto Ordinal from 2020. A patently backwards post-race officiating call is the only reason Matt DiBenedetto is a 2-time Ordinaler this year and not a NASCAR Cup Series race winner. All the drivers who initially finished behind him moved up a spot as a result, and all the drivers behind him and Buescher, who was scored 22nd in turn, moved up 2 spots. Thanks to that, Ryan Newman came 6th in the number 6 car that day, his only ordinal of 2020, and with this, he added the number 6 to his roster of 5 ordinal numbers in Cup, the most among active drivers. Okay, that should be enough outrage for one season, but because the playoffs are the playoffs, a second controversy divided the community right before the end of the year. Kevin Harvick, who won 9 races in 2020, didn't finish worse than 26th all year, and finished every single race with a running intact car, entered the third round of the playoffs with a sizable bonus point advantage. In the first race of the round, he came second at Kansas, setting him up extra well for the final 3 weeks of the season. He undeniably deserved to contend for the championship at the season finale based on the first 33 races of the 36-race schedule. But it's 2020, so disaster struck. While leading early, finicky weather played God with the year's most dominant car, beginning to mist and drizzle a bit too hard at the worst possible moment and sending Harvick's number 4 up into the wall. The damage was repairable, and Harvick was even able to work his way back into the top 10 3 days worth of rain delays later, but by the end of the race, he dropped back to a 16th place finish. The following week was go big or go home time at Martinsville, one of his worst tracks as of late statistically, and with his points advantage all but vanished, the pressure, a poorly handling car, and tire damage that put him a lap down for the majority of the race got the better of him. He struggled through the first half of the race, didn't receive any bonus points in its first 2 stages, and while his remaining competition proved their mettle by hovering around the top 5 basically the whole day, at the end of the evening, Harvick was in serious trouble. 4 drivers contend for the championship the following week. Joey Logano had already clinched a spot due to his win at Kansas. Chase Elliott was about to clinch by winning this race. 2 drivers would advance on the basis of points, and 3 of them, Harvick, Keselowski, and Hamlin, were separated by only 1 point, which is to say 1 position on track. Keselowski was running too far ahead to catch, but Hamlin was slowing, and only hanging on to the 4th finale spot because his teammate Eric Jones was obeying team orders to not pass him. As Harvick came off the final corner on the last lap, he knew his only chance to make the finale was to punt out of the way the number 18 car of Kyle Busch directly ahead of him. He took a shot and completely botched it. But it was a move born of desperation and doomed for failure. With Hamlin behind him, Harvick would have had to remove Busch from the racing line in a way that allowed himself to squeeze by, but not also allow Hamlin to pass him a few seconds later, rendering the interval between them the same. Theoretically, he should have sent the number 18 up the track from behind getting into turn 3. He did not do that. He waited too late, got his own car so squirrely that he spun out instead, and he not only gave up his championship spot over 2 catastrophically timed weeks of bad luck, he let Hamlin by on that final lap while he was facing the wrong way. That allowed the number 11 of Hamlin to make the Final 4 and finish 11th. This ties him with Greg Biffle for the second most ordinals attained in only 1 car number. Both of them have now scored 15, and with Hamlin arguably at the top of his game for the past 2 years, it's entirely possible he'll surpass the record of 18 currently held by John Sears. He only needs 3 more ordinals in the number 11 to tie. That Martinsville ordinal was Hamlin's only one of the year, and while the number isn't exactly the same to the digit, this event in the number 11 car unfolded on the 1st of November, a date whose month-day digits are likewise only made up of 1s. You know, like number 1. Surely that's an omen, right? If Harvick wasn't going to win the championship, then Hamlin, the next winningest driver of 2020, would. Right? Right? Okay, look, I have a pretty lighthearted sense of fun when it comes to sports, especially ever since my lifelong favorite driver, Casey Kane, retired prematurely in 2018. I've had no official favorite replacement in the season since, and that's allowed me to bask in the pure entertainment value that is this sport in its modern attire, with the elimination playoffs and the new car packages and the stage nonsense and what have you. It is entertaining. I don't deny that. And no matter what NASCAR does, I'm in too deep to leave. I will keep watching year after year after year. But I will always humbly believe that Chase Elliott did not deserve to be the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series champ. Hey. Hear me out. He ran a very good year, and I'll concede he was good enough to be worth a Final 4 spot, even without his clutch win at Martinsville. The full season points back him up there. That said, I just don't think he performed at a championship-worthy level all season, certainly not to the extent Harvick did. Harvick went out there and put together incredible stats unmatched in over a decade, did so with no practice or qualifying for the majority of the season, and yet almost all his worst luck was concentrated at the only time of the year where the playoff system can fuck someone over. There was no justice in the way Kevin Harvick saw a championship slip right out from under his seat. Veterans like him weathered the changing sport through thick and thin and are still here representing in the face of a talented but bland crowd of new kids, giving us cynical schmucks who started watching when Winston was still title sponsor an emotional narrative to stick around for. Congrats to the series' most popular driver for peaking when it mattered, but a second championship for Kevin Harvick should have been the icing on this year's cake. The format instead left him and me hungry. However, with that in mind, another veteran did give me a pleasant surprise, and if I didn't prefer pie, it might have involved actual cake. On the night of September 27th, coincidentally my birthday, one such veteran whose career practically epitomizes that phrase of the moral arc of history bending towards justice won his only race of the year and captured the final ordinal of this video in the process. Kurt Busch's 2020 season was stealthily good. After Ganassi lost their superstar Kyle, can you hear me, Larson, Kurt took up the mantle at the team and had an under-the-radar sort of year, at one point scoring a stretch of 21 consecutive top 10s and besting even his little brother in points for several weekends during the regular season. It all climaxed in this admittedly fluke win made possible by a well-timed caution, but he had to hold off several cars with fresher tires on a series of late restarts, and he did just that, at long last winning at his home track of Las Vegas, a facility that seemed to amount to nothing but poor luck or so-so runs for Kurt in his 20-year Cup career. Coming into that race weekend, Kurt's last 6 races there resulted in 1 top 5 and 5 finishes in the back half of the field. It wasn't exactly surprising that Kurt Busch won a race in 2020. He's won at least one per year since 2014 and exactly one a year since 2016. But the track where it happened was completely out of the blue for anyone who pays attention to the numbers. The celebration was bittersweet, as due to the pandemic, spectators weren't allowed at the track that weekend, but nonetheless, a home track win for one of the sport's greatest asshole-to-idol journeymen is a great note on which to wrap up the 2020 Ordinal list. So here they are, the 31 Ordinals that occurred during the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series season. Between these 31 Ordinals, 17 different drivers and car numbers were responsible. Another 18 car numbers run this year couldn't Ordinal due to the 40-car field limit, and of the remaining 11, 8 made the full schedule, but couldn't get us close enough to 100% ordinalization. Kyle Busch continued his not ordinaling streak for yet another season. The last time he finished 18th was in the summer of 2010. Going basically a full decade without ordinaling in a number that's been able to ordinal in every single race is honestly kind of impressive, more so than the 16-season win streak he narrowly salvaged at the end of the year, if you ask me. Other notable abstainers this year include Martin Truex Jr., William Byron, and Ty Dillon, all of whom last ordinaled in 2019. Joey Logano hasn't ordinaled since 2018, and Ty's brother Austin has only ordinaled twice in Cup and once in the number 3 car, never in the past 4.5 years. Some of these other absences aren't surprising. The number 7 car was a part-time shitbox that couldn't pull off a top 10 in its dreams, and the number 16 and 36 each only ran the Daytona 500. Out back, the front row motorsports duo of Michael McDowell's number 34 and rookie John Hunter Nemechek's number 38 also didn't ordinal in 2020. The number 34 car has run every race in the past 5 seasons, but it hasn't ordinaled since April 2016, and Michael McDowell has never ordinaled at the Cup level period. His 13-year Cup career has mostly paired him with numbers too high to ordinal, but for 3 seasons straight now, he's avoided ordinaling at front row. Can he keep the streak going next year? On the flip side of that, can Kevin Harvick and Brad Keselowski keep racking ordinals up? Those 2 drivers came into the year as the most ordinaled active drivers in the Cup Series, and they remain so, battling with each other and retired veterans as they continue to climb the charts. Harvick entered 2020 with the 6th most ordinals of all time. He enters 2021 5th, leapfrogging over Rusty Wallace. Now he has the same number, 28, that Brad Keselowski did coming into 2020. Keselowski likewise hopped past retired legend Ricky Rudd, moving from 4th to 3rd most all-time. He'll have a ways to go if he intends to catch up to Mark Martin and Dale Earnhardt, but with age more on his side than Harvick's, I wouldn't put it past Keselowski to get close, and maybe even cement the spot of 3rd most all-time for good. For me, the biggest ordinal headline as we approach 2021 has little to do with the drivers, though. After years and years of pestering, NASCAR finally got the track owners to cave for the shuffling of race weekends and new experimental layouts, meaning we have 5, yes, count them, 5 tracks or configurations coming our way, which have never before seen a Cup Series ordinal. 4 of those have never even held a Cup race at all. Bristol's Dirt event, the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, the Indy Road Course, Nashville Superspeedway, and Road America will be the site of ordinal intrigue for me in 2021. And if Corey LaJoie at the one-off Daytona Road Course race this summer was anything to go by, It's entirely possible that these weekends will provide us with inaugural Cup Ordinals too. Given how rarely the schedule has changed since the early 2000s, 2021 could mark the most debut track Ordinals in a single year that the majority of us will have seen in our lives. Could. Nothing's guaranteed. Kevin Harvick would probably tell you the same right about now. But disregard my grumbling. Congrats to everyone who Ordinaled this year, and congrats to Chase Elliott. I don't have a pool hall siren to blare, but in the new champ's honor, I'll sign off with one final piece of trivia about his performance. Thanks to Elliott's 2 2020 Ordinals, he became the first driver to score exactly 2 Ordinals in a championship cup season since David Pearson in 1966. To put that in perspective, Chase's champion father Bill was only 11 years old. Oh, and the car Pearson drove back in 66, well, if you ask me, it was pretty nice.